Guys, info for a new fusion just dropped from Raid Shadow Legends, and you don't want to skip this guy. I'll explain why, but first, welcome in Raiders. I'm Vamp. Thanks for stopping by my Raid channel. Let's talk about why I like the new fusion, Lysanthir Beastbane. This dude is a legendary, high elf faction, defense-based, Hydra specialist damage dealer. That was a mouthful. A little bit less common for a defense-based damage dealer, and this guy is being directly advertised by Plarium as a Hydra specialist, and from what I've seen in his kit, that seems to be true. So the one caveat to if this guy is as good as I think from this initial glimpse is his damage multipliers. Now, I don't think he has to have like absolutely busted damage multipliers, but if they're bad, if they're too weak for him to do what he's got the kit to do, obviously that's a problem. So that's the one caveat. But besides that, there's a lot of things to like about his kit, and I think specifically, here's what I think. I think that there's a lot of players in Raid now that are, Kraken level or very, very advanced in the game that will probably instantly comment on the first content creator video they see, easy skip. First of all, people do that about every damn champion that Raid releases. But the thing that I'm thinking here is I try to think about, okay, a lot of times these fusions, while they might be hard to do, are going to be the most beneficial, or at least seem to be the most beneficial for new or low-level players because it's a free legendary, right? Like it's an accessible legendary, let's say, and legendaries are very, very strong earlier in the game, more so than later in the game. Secondarily, Hydra is very, very, very difficult at the beginning of the game and even difficult well into the mid-game. And this guy, like I said, is advertised as a Hydra specialist. Thirdly, I try to think about, okay, does this champion have a place for players that are already progressed who are either late game or end game? And here's what I think. I think that there are going to be some players that cannot use this champion. So don't crucify me over the title. I genuinely think he's a champion that 90% of players don't want to skip. There are going to be some players that have 3 really, really solid Hydra teams. They've probably pulled a ton of shards, probably spent a good amount of money, and they get hundreds of millions on Nightmare, Brutal, and hard Hydra. That's fine. But even players like me, this guy's almost definitely a slot in my Brutal or Hard Hydra team, even though I don't know that he's good enough to break into my top 6 champions that are in my Nightmare team. So I genuinely think that a lot of players who are progressed in Hydra and do have that real fat damage on their Nightmare Hydra key still could consider this guy at minimum in their 3rd team, if not their 2nd team. Okay, so enough rambling about that. I just did want to say I don't think this is only in-game players or only early game players. However, I do think that this guy is going to be a godsend. If his damage multipliers aren't terrible, he's going to be a godsend for struggling players in Hydra. Honestly, it doesn't matter what level, right? But at the low level, you're definitely struggling just because Hydra is difficult and you haven't accrued a lot of champions yet. Even in the mid game, okay? This guy's got some stuff in his kit that's very exciting for players who really struggle, especially because he's supposed to help counter the Devour mechanic where the Hydra head chomps your champion and then they sit there with that little green HP that you're supposed to break or deplete or whatever to get them back before the Devour counter is up. And at that point, they get swallowed or digested or whatever it's called, and you can't get them back. So this guy specifically supposed to counter that. That's a very interesting thing, right? Because he's not just a damage dealer or not just a debuffer. He's specifically supposed to help you get your champions back before they get swallowed. So let's go over his kit. Lysanthir Beastbane, like I said, legendary high elf defense-based damage dealer, A1 Echo Bolt. Attacks one enemy 2 times. First hit has a 75, books to 100% chance of placing Hex on the target for 2 turns. I'm not going to lie, I don't know why we really give a shit about a Hex on one single target for 2 turns, but it's there. Places a 30% increased crit damage buff on this champion for 2 turns. That is also very weird. If it were AoE, I think that could be very good. I think it would be much better if, quite frankly, I think he would almost elevate himself, across the board, maybe a full tier if this was an AoE Hex on his A1, personally. And even if it was a single hitter. This, as it is, it's a single target, double hitter. But the increased crit damage, like I said, there's some utility there because there's still a lot of enemy max HP or, people really trying to crank damage out of certain, regular DPS type champions. But just on himself, yes, I get it. He's supposed to be a damage dealer, but that's just like increased attack. Or sorry, for him, increased defense would be better. I just don't quite get. And like I said, on himself only is weird because now you introduce the mechanic of him giving himself a buff that's not very common, that's much more likely to make him the target or at least tied for targeting with whoever another champion on your team is who's doing mischief tanking, and mischief might try to grab buffs from him. And given that he's going to be built as a damage dealer like 99% of the time, he's almost definitely going to have no resist. So this is weird to give himself one buff that's an uncommon buff, so it's not going to be overwritten by most champions in Hydra. I don't know about that. It's a little bit weird. But there's no downside to Hex. Single target's weird. Two hitter is okay. Mediocre A1, I think. Wily Hunter, his A2, attacks one enemy 2 times, has a 20% chance of repeating the attack. I actually didn't see anybody really mention. I watched Nub and Hell Hades videos on this guy because I don't have any access to like content creator stuff, so I don't get notified ahead of time. I don't get any of their special animations. That's why I got this boring ass graphic on the screen. Sorry about that. But I'm basically finding the information out just like you, and then just trying to get it out quickly so that it's still relevant. Anyway, I didn't see anybody really mentioning that. I guess Hell Hades did call it out very briefly, but this 20% chance of repeating an attack, that's like, if I remember correctly, that's a higher chance than Rhonda joining on her passive. It's also a higher chance than a Relentless proc. So this is a really good chance. Obviously, it's 1 in 5, so that's just the math. Every time he does it, he has a 1 in 5 chance. But I'm curious, if there's a chance that he can do it and then once he repeats, like if it's every time he does the attack versus when he takes his turn, this could repeat, if you get lucky, like more than 2 times. So like Skull Lord Vargal has that on a skill, and I don't think the skill explicitly says it can just chain and repeat numerous times. So it could be that it's a chance to repeat once, or a chance to repeat and then another chance to repeat and then another chance to repeat until it stops. So I don't know, but either way, let's just say it's 1, right? Worst case scenario. 20% chance of repeating attack, if it's a big hit, double hitter, is really nice. Like if you're used to single target damage dealers in Hydra that hit once or have a double hitter that can't repeat, you'll know that if they have good damage multipliers, especially if you have AoE Hex on the team, you get really good damage on most difficulties depending on your gear from a big single target nuke. This is a 2-hitter single target nuke that has a 1 in 5 chance of repeating. I think that's quite good. Anyway, when this champion counterattacks or teams up with allies to attack an enemy, will use this skill instead of their default skill. The damage inflicted by this skill is increased by 10% each time an ally is devoured, stacks up to 50%. So a lot going on in this skill. I don't think, and the other content creators call this out too, I don't think anybody's really using counterattack in Hydra because AoE counterattack is just really dangerous. Really just because of mischief, to be quite frank. I think that the counterattacks from things like Retribution, maybe, from Revenge accessories, things like that, he could counterattack that way. But the ally attack, especially for people who have Mikage, is very, very common in Hydra and Chimera. Obviously, this guy is specifically for Hydra. I doubt he'll make it into Chimera. But a lot of people are bringing in ally attacks to Hydra, and he's going to use this big hitter A2, and I'm curious, I don't see any reason why he doesn't have a chance on the ally attack as well to have a 20% chance of repeating the attack. So that's a lot of damage. There's a chance that he gets 4 hits here, like a double hitter from the ally attack, and then another double hitter because he procced the conditional 20% chance to repeat the attack, all off of an ally attack, and it's not even his turn. I really like champions that have a different skill than their A1 that their kit dictates is the skill they use on an ally attack. So I'm a big fan of this. Then you have the added wrinkle of the damage inflicted by this skill increases by 10% each time an ally is devoured, stacks up to 50. That is going to take a bit because especially at the beginning, even in like Nightmare Hydra, they don't devour champions that quickly. So you're going to have to get the 5th champion at least has to be devoured for that to be at maximum stacks. So 5 devours, he'll be at 50% more damage. Very nice. It's not crazy that it stacks up to 50 because I think Ninjas goes up to 100. I think what's his name? What's the Varl, the Destroyer, goes up to 100%, I think, and I think Harima goes up to 100%. But anyway, this guy, he's a specialist, right? Those guys are just outright DPS, and so 50% is fine. Anyway, A3, Ruined Snares. I wanted to read Ruined, but it's definitely Ruined. Attacks all enemies twice. Very nice. makes him a candidate if he's not in like Savage, Lethal, Merciless, whatever, to be in some sort of like Hex set maybe or something like that. Even a Provoke set possibly if you're using that, if you need that help. And again, early players might, because there's not too terribly many really, really good Provoke Hydra champions. So if you haven't gotten lucky enough to pull one and you haven't pulled a ton of legendaries or a ton of champions yet, that, Provoke set on an AoE damage dealer, that may be a decent option. But also, like I said, shout out Curse set for Hex, which would be really complementary to his kit. Anyway, it attacks all enemies twice. Each hit has a 75 books to 100% chance, and then the cooldown can go from 5 to 3, which is really good. So can the A2. I forgot to mention that. 100% chance when booked of placing decreased speed and weaken debuff for 2 turns if the target's under Hex, places these debuffs before attacking. So I still think, reading this Hex thing, since he has Hex in his kit on the A1, but it's single target, I just think that he's going to combo really well and he's going to shine a lot brighter if he's on a team that has a champion that reliably puts up Hex via a Curse set or has AoE Hex in their kit. So he could be really good with like Michinaki, really good with Mithrala, really good with the typical Curse set Lydia, anybody like that. There's another damage dealer I can't think of right now that does AoE Hex. I can't remember, but I think he would shine, like I said, a lot brighter with someone on the team that brings AoE Hex. And then you just kind of ignore the fact that he has Hex on his A1, to be quite frank, which I already talked about. The A1 is by far the weakest part of his kit. I don't quite understand it. So then now we're getting to something that I think is probably the selling point of his kit. And this is why I said that I think that all players that are not just shitting on Hydra with 3 full teams, all of them are like just dialed to 11. Anybody should be able to use this guy, and the biggest impact is probably going to be felt by mid-game and early-game players. Here's why. Survivalist Supreme passive will ignore life barrier and ally protection buffs. That is, pardon my French, fucking huge. Ignoring, like, I'm a late-game player. I've gotten my whole run ruined or very damn close when life barrier pops on to a head that has eaten my champion and there's like 1 turn left in the devour counter. This dude's just going to ignore it, and he's going to ignore the ally protection buff from the Head of Suffering. So if you're struggling with keeping up block debuffs or you don't have a reliable buff removal on the team, then you're going to consistently have ally protection on all the heads besides Suffering when Suffering is spawned in, the lineup. So not only is that going to, like, let's say that a different head, like the head of Blight, has devoured your champion, and the head of Decay puts life barrier on him, and the head of Suffering puts ally protection on everyone, so that includes the head of Blight. He is now hugely protected. I mean, life barrier is just a big fat shield, so it doesn't damage mitigate, but it does require you to break the life barrier to get to that green devour HP and get your champion back out. Ally protection is going to take a big part of your damage and send it over to the head of Suffering, which is the tankiest head, and you don't care about at that exact moment because he's not the one that devoured your champion. So the fact that he can ignore both means the only thing this dude doesn't ignore, which you really need to have a way to counter this anyway, is Poison Cloud. They probably aren't going to have someone do that because Poison Cloud's meant to be the pain in the ass that it is, and there are ways to counter it. Primarily, really, there's a way to counter it: bring block buffs. So this guy ignoring life barrier means that it's like the ignore shields mechanic that's so strong for arena nukers, some of them. You just get to bypass that and get straight to knocking down the HP when you hit with this guy. And we already talked about, forget ally attack. That's just going to make him even better. But if you have his A2 ready for when this happens, when your other DPS, or it doesn't matter if it's DPS, I don't even know why I said that. When your other champion is devoured and this guy's available, he has a 2-hitter, possibly a 4+ hitter, depending on, like I said, if that caps at 1 chance to repeat attack or if it could go to more, to completely ignore life barrier, completely ignore ally protection, and get your champion back. Then at the bottom here, it says increases this champion's defense by 5% for each active buff on this champion, stacks up to 50%. So to max that out, you would need 10 buffs. That's a tall order. But this is something that I think any amount of boost for any buff is just a boost. It makes him more survivable because he's defense based, and it gives him more damage because his damage is defense based. So it's a net positive to have a passive like this, but this also makes it where he might be able to do more raw damage for people that are more, late game or end game. Like I said, probably not in their primary team unless he's just an absolute nuker, like just crazy nukes. Probably in their second or third team, but they might have a team, very, very likely they have a team that can put 8 to 10 buffs up on their champions and get this dude in a lot of extra defense for a big damage boost. So it's not nothing, right? You don't want to be thinking in the early game, let me build my entire team around trying to have 10 buffs all the time to get this. But whatever amount of buffs you do have with your well-balanced team, this will just give you some extra damage, and then it caps at 50%. He's got a pretty damn good ally defense R as well. All battles 28%. So that's my thoughts. I wanted to get this out kind of quickly. I think that this guy very likely has a slot in a variety of level of accounts Hydra lineup for all 3 of their keys, right? Like across all 3 of their keys. Like I said, I'm perfectly willing to concede that this guy is not going to break into top teams for already established people that are beating down the Hydra at Nightmare, unless he has like absolutely insane supernatural level multipliers, and we don't know yet. So let's wait. Let's see what his multipliers are like. But for now, guys, my genuine thoughts are I will not be skipping this guy, even though I do probably have a full 6 set for my Nightmare team, so he'll be in my second or third team. I will not be skipping him. I recommend you do not skip him. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below about this guy. Maybe I can start getting those infamous easy skip comments that pop up on every raid video every time a fusion drops. It's hilarious. They could literally release a guy that says, fusing this guy just wins you Raid Shadow Legends, and there'd be 50 comments under a video going easy skip. But anyway, let me know. The link to my Discord, I'm just going to shout it out real quick, is in the description below. We'd love to have you. We offer some advice and just share progress screenshots and celebrate stuff and just chat. It's an awesome server. And as always, guys, I'm a really small channel. If you haven't subscribed yet and you like the content, would really appreciate a subscribe, as well as likes, comments, shares. Always help boost the algorithm, blah, blah, blah. Thank you so much. But seriously, guys, like I do interact with the comments, and I'm not just looking for comments just for the algorithm. What are your thoughts on this guy? Let me know down below, and I will catch you guys in the next raid video. Stay min-maxy and happy raiding.